So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and it's been quite a while actually since I did a free-for-all, so it seems that the time is right to use this replay. This is a map we've seen somewhat recently, however. Previously I'd only shown this map once before, but we're going to see it twice in reasonably quick succession here. I think this is the Etten Moors, or it's in that sort of area anyway. And this is going to be a full free-for-all, so essentially we have 4 teams, each with 2 members on it, so that's as big as you can get. You can't have 8 teams with just 1 player on it, which is a bit of a shame, because the chaos that would ensue from that would be rather spectacular, but unfortunately Medieval 2 does not allow for that. However, we will be going through the army compositions now. We'll start off with the blue team and the player who sent me this replay. So this is from Arsal Ali, so big thank you to him. And he is going to be playing as Imladris, which is most certainly his favourite faction. I've noticed him play Imladris more than any other. And he is also going to be joined by another player who's playing as Imladris as well. So the joint Imladris team going to be over here on the left-hand side of the map, and he's got some Eldar Winger. He also has some Noritano warriors here at the front. So the slightly cheaper option in terms of the archers, and this makes some sense. Most of the time in Imladris you don't want to go too archer heavy, because it's certainly not their focus. Their main strength is definitely in how powerful their heavy infantry and cavalry is. Speaking of which, just in behind them he has got some Eldarenwe Haru Hatal who are hiding, and it's worth saying on this map, hiding is a very valid strategy with all of the trees that are around. And next to them he does have some Gwaithdy Arthand as well. This is not the General's Bodyguard unit. But even so, we've seen the Gwaithdy Arthand perform very, very well in the past. They're very, very resilient. They don't kill things particularly quickly, but they will stand up to a huge amount of punishment. And then over here we also have some more Haru Hatal, more hidden units as well, the upgraded variant of the Eldar Makar, so again just making this infantry just that little bit tougher. And I think this is a full line of them, indeed it is. He also has some Imladris Blade Masters, which are not hiding currently. The main difference between them and the other heavy elven swordsmen of this type is they do have an anti-cavalry bonus, which does give them a slight edge on the others in terms of overall effectiveness, because if cavalry does get caught in and amongst them, they will do that extra bit of damage. But other than that, they are very similar to stuff like the Lothlorien Swordmasters, the Hiri Lung, and that sort of unit. He's also got the Eldarenwe Haru Makil, which again are an incredibly potent heavy swordsman, very expensive for what they are, but also potentially extremely damaging, very difficult to kill in a 1-to-1 melee, but they are, as a result of not being multiple HP, a little bit more vulnerable to arrow fire in spite of their very good armour values, but especially cavalry charges. A good unit of cavalry can do a lot of damage to the Haru Makil if they get a good charge. And then, back here, the Haru Myro, again one of the best non-bodyguard lancers in the game, so they do not have multiple HP, but they are probably actually the best non-bodyguard lancer in the game, to be honest, with that elven skill which gives them a little bit of a leg up in melee, even if it's not what they're designed for. They also have those shields, which means they can withstand a little bit of punishment from arrows in addition to the good armour, and I believe they are also one of those units which does have the full charge bonus of 20, similar to stuff like the Brotherhood of the Lance, but unlike the Brotherhood of the Lance, they are not made of tissue paper. Then, over here, we have the Gwaithdy Rockdor, of course, the Elven Knights. This is where the General's going to be. You can see him in the background over there. Again, the Knights are just, on an open field battle like this in a free-for-all, Knights are pretty much a given, just because of how powerful they can be. Again, the kings of the battlefield, and the Gwaithdy Rockdor, being the High Elven Knights, are among the very best. Then, his ally, who is going to be over here as we sort of skip through the trees. We can see in the distance there that his General is also going to be in the Gwaithdy Rockdor, so they're going to have both factions wielding their knights. He's got a bit of a different composition by the looks of things though. He has brought the unupgraded Imladris Riders, and as far as individual horse archers go, they're very, very good, very, very potent. With the upgraded armour especially, it means that they can sort of mitigate some of the arrow fire. Foot archers are a pretty good counter to horse archers, just to zone them out because of their generally superior range. They don't have the armour upgrade here, but they're still very, very good. Of course, those elven archers are going to be able to find their mark more easily than most. In fact, by the looks of things, they do have this unit have the first level of armour upgrade. They've got the helms. Still, so 2 units of horse archers, and they could get lost in the trees and sort of conceal themselves, which might make it a little bit more difficult for the enemies to sort of account for their position. He's also got some Eldar Makar, Haru Makil. He's actually got some Imladris Guardians as well, a lot of Imladris Guardians with the armour upgrade, so an altogether simpler army composition by the looks of things, and he's going to fan out this way. He's got some Haru Myro guarding the flanks, as well as some Haru Hatal accompanying them. And then up here on the slightly higher ground, he also has some Noritano warriors flanked by a couple of units of Eldar Winger. Then, moving over to the lowest team, we have the southern team. We have M1 Breakout, who's playing as Lothlorien, and I believe, yep, A. Lamau, who is also playing as Lothlorien, so again, players playing as a unified faction. He's got some Ethel Tirith here on the front line, and they will be both renamed and given a much nicer unit model in 0.97. I believe they're going to be called the March Wardens, I believe, and they're going to be given a sort of a more in-keeping unit model, because this is obviously still from vanilla, the Light Elven Archers, and it will be replaced. But even so, as archers, they perform a very similar function to the Eldar Quinga, in that they are the lowest tier of archers that Lothlorien can bring, but they're still good because they're elves, of course. Lothlorien do have other options, however, in terms of their archers, which are probably a little bit stronger than Imladris. They do have the Lothlorien archers, for instance, which they can bring in slightly greater numbers than the Heru Quinga that Imladris can bring. More Lothlorien archers there, obviously very potent. Then a mixture of Lothlorien blades, and I think that is just Lothlorien blades, actually. No, we got the Sword Masters, so again, going for a little bit more infantry heavy. This is a unit which could be useful if Imladris do come for them. Some Lothlorien warriors, that AP, combined with that Elven skill, means that they should be able to withstand Imladris for a little bit in melee, and also get some of those nice AP swings. So Maether Ilazgelen, which are going to be incredibly important for trying to zone out any cavalry that comes from Lothlorien. That's one of my main, I guess, complaints about Lothlorien in the current patch, is the fact that cavalry is a bit of a pain to deal with efficiently. You're extremely reliant on the Maether Ilazgelen to do that, because most of your other line, you do have heavy spears and you do have light spears, but it still feels like you don't really have the options there, because your own cavalry back here, Lothlorien Mounted Company, very similar to the Heru Myro in many ways, only I think they're slightly less expensive, but they're also not quite as good off the charge. But the same principle applies. They can go into melee because of their elven skill, but it's not efficient, especially with how expensive the Mounted Company are. And that's really the main problem that Lothlorien have on horseback, certainly against Imladris. Imladris' cavalry is far superior. The Galathrim Nobles, however, archers are one area that Lothlorien can score an advantage over Imladris in the current patch, and the Galathrim Nobles are a big part of that because they're fantastic infantry, but also very, very potent archers as well. Let's see if this army over here from Elamau has brought anything different. He has got some Sylvan Spears, which you could argue that this is the unit that you need to bring in order to be effective against cavalry, but I will also say that in 0.96.1, spears are pretty underwhelming against cavalry. If cavalry is quick charging in and out against spears, you won't be punished for charging into spears in the first place as much as you probably should be. In 0.97 that will change, and Lothlorien will be getting new stuff anyway, but for here you can throw them under the bus against high tier cavalry if you want, but you can't really expect too much in the way of results. You also have the Karas Galadhon's Guardians, which is where the general's going to be here. Again, if cavalry charges into them, they're obviously going to get destroyed, but avoiding pikes with cavalry is very, very easy, to be quite frank, unless you charge headlong into them. Pikes are very slow, cavalry is obviously much faster. It's very easy to get in and around them. The best you can hope for when using pikes against cavalry is that you make the cavalry linger too long near your javelins, crossbows or archers to the point where you do a lot of damage to them, which anyone worth their salt might bring their cavalry is not going to be making that mistake. Ethel Tirith over here, more Sylvan Spears, he's got some Mounted Company back there as well, and several hidden units as well. I'd expect a fair amount of archers over here too. So, let's move on to the third team now, and we have Cardlan, played by Neo Denulko, and he has got a mixture of Greenwatch Garrison footmen and Minisca Ruthlin swordsmen on the front line. A good front line this is. Obviously the cheap pikes of Cardlan are very, very good at holding down a front line, especially against elves that are not Linden, because all of those elves struggle to field as many pikes as Cardlan, and you can definitely keep the elves at bay. And to make sure that they can't be pushed through, the swordsmen are there just to give them a bit of rigidity, and of course the armour and shields of the swordsmen should absorb some of the arrows from the elves, even if, with Lothlorien's quality of archers, even the swordsmen with their armour and shields will start to take some pretty heavy losses as time goes on. So Minisca Ruthlin archers back here, their main job is going to be trying to skirmish with the elves, the armour and shields trying to keep them alive while they do some chip damage over time. We'll see if that works out for them. We also have the Minisca Ruthlin sharpshooters, the crossbows, of course, one of the main strengths of Cardlan. I should mention before we go on, actually, some people have mentioned that Cardlan just look like generic medieval dudes in this patch, and I would agree, but next patch that's going to be completely changed. They will be given the colour scheme of sort of like the green and burgundy will remain, but the overall armour style will be changed to look like a bit of a Númenórean look, because obviously that is where Cardlan come from, almost like they found like a Númenórean vault of weaponry and they sort of scavenged it, so it's got a bit of a tatty look, like to signify that Númenor is long gone, but it will be sort of more in line with the Lord of the Rings style in 0.97, as I'm sure anyone who's paying attention to the mod will have seen. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul here, obviously very, very resilient individually. Double as Spears, they should be exceptional in the next patch. Currently, obviously, Spears, a little bit underwhelming, but still very, very tough, and they also encourage nearby units. Minotaur Roman Guardians, obviously much like the Sharpshooters, good in melee because they have those halberds, also the crossbows. Dunedain Captains, obviously bodyguard swordsmen, very, very potent, that's where the general's going to be. Warns of Tir Gorthad, good for sort of putting in the middle of your line so that they can encourage the nearby troops to fight on. Merc War Chiefs as well. There's a unit back here. That's actually just a Mirkwood unit. But yeah, Tarbad Warhammers as well. So all of the elites are here, all of the crossbows, some archers, and then a pretty standard Cardland front line. Over here, I think we're only going to see one unit from Mirkwood. The rest of their army is hiding, which should give you an idea of what it is. Thurney Tower, Hetherley Tower, perhaps some Gwath. The trees obviously make it very easy for Mirkwood to hide, very much in their element. But the general, of course, cannot hide, so it will be the Yarathalion y Nanwaith. So Thranduil is going to be with his Palace Guard, which, of course, as far as the infantry unit goes, one of the most devastating in the game. And then finally, we move on to the top team over here. Roger that, playing as the Witch Realm of Angmar. He's got Scourge Raiders, Guardians of Khan Doom, and Witch Realm Pikemen, all ready to make their move. So this is the Orc team over here. Witch Realm Hammer Guard as well, Trolls of Angmar, Trolls of Gundabad. There's probably a few hidden units around here as well, so they're probably going to start charging towards Mirkwood, which is definitely the right thing to do in this situation. The fact that you cannot see a great deal of their army indicates that they have a lot of their hidden archers, and Angmar, of course, are very, very good at flooding forward quickly and denying the use of skirmishers. So we'll see if Mirkwood are going to be able to withstand that pressure. Meanwhile, over here, staring down the barrel of an Imladris army that has the high ground, we have Bloodbath McGrath playing as Mordor. He's got some fodder. He's got some Moran on guard, he's got some maulers, some Moran on infantry, and then we start to get back into some of his more important units back here, including the Minas Morgul Chosen, the Black Legion. Melkor's Chosen are going to be very, very important here for trying to shut down that High Elven cavalry. He also has some Trolls which can do the same job, 2 units of Olag High in fact, some Temple Guard, the armor-piercing arrows on these guys, very, very handy actually in this sort of situation. This is where the General's going to be hanging out as well, because he could focus down some of those High Elven Knights with those steel bows. Some javelins, some orc fodder, and also some mountain trolls here at the back. So, without further ado, let's begin. And I'm not sure what's going to happen first. I would imagine that it will be Angmar barreling towards Mirkwood that will be the first engagement. You would imagine so anyway. It's possible that Lothlorien could also try and double team Cardolan. Oftentimes in a free-for-all, whoever ends up winning is the ones who avoid battle for the longest. So I do hope that everyone starts their engagements quickly. Does look as though Lothlorien are going to start heading towards Cardolan, but by the same token, Finrod Felagund's army of Imladris is also moving down this way as well. Perhaps they will be going after Lothlorien from the side. Over here, Angmar are in fact not going to go for Mirkwood, interestingly enough. They are actually going to peel off and assist their Mordor allies in perhaps trying to go uphill against Imladris. We have the Gwathi Rockdoor heading here into the middle of the map, sort of the lowest section of ground in and amongst the trees. I'd be interested. It is sort of risky to send your units combing through the woods all on their lonesome, because they could end up getting caught by all sorts. The Elk Cavalry from Mirkwood, of course, Spear Cavalry, which actually it looks like they are over here. Indeed they are. Reekbin Amon Lank. Don't want to get caught by them because of their skill and their anti-cavalry bonus in melee. There's also the Witch Realm Inquisitors that have revealed themselves, including a couple of units of Warp Riders flanking them. That's a really, really potent anti-cavalry force. The High Elves need to be careful with how they choose to engage this, and this doesn't seem careful to me. Finrod Felagund is going to charge right on in. Roger that should absolutely just charge in with these Witch Realm Inquisitors. He has absolutely nothing to fear in melee against the Gwathi Rockdoor, especially not, well, with the Warp Riders he doesn't have anything to fear from them in melee. He does have, of course, the Eldar Winger in close support. I'm a little bit surprised that he isn't committing here. He is now, and this could be very, very bloody. I mean, the Gwathi Rockdoor are strong, but I feel as though Finrod Felagund has made the mistake of thinking that they're invincible here, when they most certainly are not. Here come the Witch Realm Inquisitors, the Warp Riders. Took a bit of damage off the charge there, as did the Gwathi Rockdoor. The Gwathi Rockdoor need to get into melee now, though, because some of these archers are pretty exposed. We can see over here that engagements are continuing. The Trolls of Gundabad are actually going to be skewered here by Arsal's knights, and this is a mistake because the Trolls, they can take a lot of damage off the charge, but this is already turning into a bit of a mosh pit fight, which I think will favour the Orcs because of The Inquisitors, the Melkor's Chosen, the Trolls that didn't get charged are now coming into melee as well. And most of the High Elven Cavalry is at its most effective on the charge rather than in sustained melee. But the Orcs are pushing forward, as you would expect. And it's whether or not they can actually sustain this sort of pressure. The Warg Riders are shaken. They need to get out of melee, really, because the Heru Vital are nearby. Those spears are going to be nasty. The Gwythi Rhokdor getting a nice charge there into the flank of the Witch Realm Scourge Raiders as well. It could be that this sort of staggered line from the Elves hurts the Orcs a little bit. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are getting into the back lines now, able to get in and amongst the Norotina warriors. But honestly, if I were the Orcs, I would just be trying to hunt down the High Elven Cavalry, because if you can stop that, all they have left is their infantry, which Imladris infantry is obviously very effective, but you have numbers with which you can try and swamp over them, and without any cavalry they wouldn't have any sort of rapid responses to that. The Melkor's Chosen are shaken now as well, because they're right in front of this Elven firing squad, as well as the Gwythi Arthan catching a few of them in melee. I think the problem with the Orc advance here is that it's just too broken. You need to be united if you advance as the Orcs. They're sending in the Olar Kai. They'll survive for a little while, but the Imladris infantry is good enough that it will be able to deal some pretty substantial damage to the Olar Kai if they aren't supported quickly, and the Orc infantry is lagging behind on this flank, unfortunately. The Heru Mairo are here. You can actually see as well that Mirkwood are over here taking bites out of both teams. So you can see that the Royekbin Amon Lank and the Abranon Inanwaith were up here as well. So that's the multiple HP variant. Now they're pretty vulnerable to arrow fire, and they are quite close to the Imladris archers in particular. The Imladris riders could be a hard counter actually to the Royekbin Amon Lank. But Imladris and the Orcs there taking a little bit of damage by Mirkwood, taking some nibbles, perhaps feeling confident about their ability to deal with Lothlorien. They're already over here. Again, Finrod Felagund's charging after them, and again, Mirkwood could have just turned around and stomped that general with all of those units of cavalry that they had. The Trolls of Angmar are moving in, but they're just hideously outmatched here in melee. The Heru Makil are here, as well as the upgraded Imladris Guardians. You can see that the Angmar forces have moved forward, and they are engaging, but well, the Eldar Quinga might lose to the Scourge Raiders, but elsewhere things are going pretty well for the Elves. You can see that some of them are moving forward, the Morannon Guard trying to sort of swamp in. Eldar Makar victory seems certain. The very broken advance here at the Orcs. You need to be united and sort of crash down on the enemy all at once when you're playing as the Orcs, especially when you're up against a faction that has a really heavy infantry focus like Imladris. Also, you can see over here that the Temple Executioners are in melee. Missed them in the army comp. The Temple Guard are still back there shooting, and it's a little bit difficult to keep track of how they're actually doing, but they should be focusing down important targets. If they're going after basic archers, then that would certainly be a waste. With the Temple Executioners over here, then perhaps Mordor can win, but the Heru Mairo are actually rear-charging the Temple Executioners. They may be depleted, but this will still be enough to put a dent in them. It could also send some of the weaker Mordor units routing. You can see here that the Black Legion of Barad-dûr are not really... I think actually it's about time we turn down the speed to house speed. The Black Legion of Barad-dûr, this is not where they're at the strongest. You know, in sustained melee, they're not actually that good. Pushing through the lines, very good at, but sustained melee, not so great. Down here, we can see that Lothlorien and Cardlan are starting to test one another's lines. Interestingly enough, Cardlan are charging forward. Mirkwood do have their cavalry out here on the flank, and it looks as though Lothlorien fell for an engagement here, which... There are arrows flowing in here, which will do a lot of damage to the Mirkwood cavalry, but this is not a good engagement for Lothlorien. Mirkwood's cavalry is spear cavalry, it has a bonus to other cavalry in melee, the Mounted Company does not. And you can see now that Mirkwood are cycling out, and they are taking damage from the archers, but yeah, Mirkwood definitely has the cavalry advantage over Lothlorien here, especially with Lothlorien coming without their heightened, well, their higher tier bow cavalry. Mirkwood, though, in Arius' infantry is moving forward. Megil e Erin, Hethel e Tower, Hiri Lung, so a lot of the Mirkwood infantry is now pouring forwards, and they will be sorely needed on the front line. Cardlan, I think, are being slightly guilty of the same thing that the Orcs are on the other flank. They are flowing forwards, but their advance is a little bit broken, and you can see that over here this part of the line is already engaged, but these basic Cardlan units are going to be absolutely no match for Lothlorien axes. Like, the Lothlorien quality is simply too high. You need to have the support of your entire force if you're going to try and do this against an elven faction like Lothlorien or Imladris. Both of them are very good in this sort of situation. especially against forces which don't necessarily have a lot of quality on the front. Like Cardland here, it's a very efficient front line with these cheap pikes and these, you know, good solid line infantry units, but you know, being efficient sometimes just isn't enough against units of really high quality. Like the Lothlorien axes and blades, they're just going to be too much. Sylvan Staffmasters are here, you don't see them an awful lot. The pikes are coming in, they're not in a very long formation either, they're in sort of a block, which means their total effectiveness is going to be reduced a little bit. So Mirkwood are coming forward, and they are going to be supporting Cardland on this flank against M1 Breakout's army. So M1 Breakout might have a little bit harder of a time than his ally on the other side, who's only having to deal with a portion of the Cardland forces, as Mirkwood try and swamp in and over Lothlorien. Meanwhile, let's go back up here to this engagement, and still the line battle continues. The Witchrealm Scourge Raiders getting in behind this force from Imladris, but still they're not having a great deal of luck. The quality just isn't there for the Orcs as the Gwaith Arthand hold the line resolutely. The Temple Guard haven't taken too many losses, but they are now getting engaged in melee by some Blade Masters. The Executioners are still on the front line, but those charges did take a bit of a toll on them, and Imladris is still holding the line. A combination of the Heru Makeel and Blade Masters doing enough. These Heru Makeel are also peeling off the front line, trying to get down over here. There are some Numenorian Shadow Guard moving forward, and those are Rangers. If they're out of ammunition, then you'd have expected Imladris to take a little bit more damage than they seem to have. The Gwaith Rokdor are over here, and they are very, very static at the moment, so there's a lot to micro in a very fast battle like this. So it doesn't surprise me too much that they maybe aren't paying too much attention. They are now. They're going to try and get away as the Minas Morgul Chosen close them in melee. They are going to get away. Still, you can see in the background, the Olag Kai are actually still alive, so they managed to push their way through, but there's only 3 of them left. They took well, there's more than 3 left, but both of the units are still here. The Trolls in the backline are doing their best, as well as the Melkor's Chosen, which are also depleted, so they may have taken losses, but they are getting back here into the High Elven Archer lines. There are also, over there, still the Imladris Riders left alive. Out of ammunition, they're trying to charge in, but Horse Archers have got a very poor charge, to be frank. I mean, it will still do damage because of the mass of cavalry units overall, but it's certainly going to be nowhere near as effective as a unit of Lancers. But still, it will have a bit of an impact on these units, but you can see here the Guardians of Khan Dûm, defeat seems certain. They're going toe-to-toe with the Eldar Makar whilst taking charges from the Imladris Riders. Still down here, there's some Witchrealm Pikemen. There's engagements just all over the place. It's a very messy engagement, which most of the time favours the Orcs, but I feel as though with how the Elves started this engagement, it could still go either way. Again, I haven't seen where the Hammer Guard are at. Their presence could be pretty damn important. The Heru Vital doing what they can to face down those units in melee. The Olag Kai are sort of waddling back into melee over here to try and help out against the ever-resolute Gwaith Arthand. Heru Makeel defeat still seems certain. So yeah, very messy engagement, which again tends to favour the Orcs. And as well, like you can see that the archer companies back here are exposed. I mean, the Olag Kai could now just get into these Eldar Quinga, and the Eldar Quinga, a lot of these archers have just been dealt with pretty well by the Orcs. So in spite of the broken advance, they have managed to get into the cookie jar somewhat and start to do damage to the backlines of the Elves, and that will bring it down to just a pure infantry engagement, which is still, it could go either way still. Meanwhile, over here, the Lothlorien forces colliding with their Wood Elven brethren from Mirkwood, with the backup from Cardland, and it looks as though Lothlorien are getting the better of this engagement so far, although that surprises me considering the numbers of Mirkwood and the positioning. I would imagine that Mirkwood will start to win this. The problem is they're all blobbed up, and Lothlorien are going to be able to get around here and start surrounding this area. Here in the middle, the combination of Mirkwood and Cardland trying to do some damage, and they are, but moving forwards are going to be the Karas Galadhon's Guardians. Back there in the back lines once again, we can see the duel between the Lothlorien Cavalry and the Mirkwood Cavalry, although the Mirkwood Cavalry is so depleted as a result of being under archer fire for too long. They lingered too long near the Lothlorien archers, and they are made to pay for that, so the Mounted Company actually doing very well here. Meanwhile over here, Lothlorien, you would imagine, Eola is going to be just fine against the Cardland forces. Lothlorien do have some armour values, not quite as much as Imladris, but the AP on the Tharbad Warhammers should still come into effect. The Cardland elites are definitely what's going to be propping up their entire force, although over here, the numbers supported by the elites, the Merc War Chiefs, the Tharbad, no, the Warns of Tir Gorthad rather, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, the Athalion Inanwave have come over here as well, so the Palace Guard, a lot of elites over here on this section of line. And all of a sudden, Aelemau's army is looking pretty haggard as Cardland continue to move forward, and the crossbows are in place now, and as soon as Cardland have got their crossbows in place, you're in for a bad time. Their archers are also there as well, just pouring fire down upon this section of the Lothlorien line. And as this battle has gone on, I actually think this has tipped in favour of Cardland and Mirkwood. Madness. Lothlorien still look pretty strong over here with all of their archers. They still have some mounted company that they could use to get in and around and charge. And over here in this section they have managed to trap a lot of the Mirkwood forces and they're already routing. But I don't know, I mean that engagement over there is going pretty poorly for them. Their pikes are on the front line, so it's a bit half and half at the moment. Right, let's see what's happening up here. York Javelins trying to get into place. The Gwaith the Arthand are here. They're being hunted by the Temple Guard and Executioners as well as what's left of the Olag High, so that should be enough to kill the Gwaith the Arthand, to be frank. But that is also most of what Mordor have left in terms of elites. They still have some Minas Morgul Chosen running around, but it's still just utter chaos up here in this engagement, to be honest. We're going to go back up to 1 speed as the Gwaith the Rokdor charge into the back of those Orc Javelins. That's definitely going to be enough to break them. As we move down here, there's still a lot of Guardians of Khan Doom, but still, the quality of the elves says that victory seems certain for them. Eldar Quinga are moving around. Witchround Pikemen. The Guardians of Khan Doom are getting the better of this engagement now, though, the Eldar Makar. I feel as though I've seen Arsal do this in the past as well. Well, there goes the Angmar General, but I've seen him do this in the past where he brings 2 units of Eldar Quinga and a unit of Noroteno warriors. Personally, I feel as though there's a really strong case for not bringing any archers at all as Imladris, because I feel as though they've been more trouble than they're worth in this battle. I feel as though if Imladris had gone full melee and full cavalry, they would have had more success here, because the back lines were exposed by Mordor. Those Olag High and the Melkor's Chosen started killing those archers, and the Orcs could have continued to do that. This unit of archers here was wide open for assault and they decided to leave them alone. Both of the Orc generals have now fallen, however, so Imladris may well be able to weather this storm, but I still feel as though both Arsal and Finrod Felagund in this case went too heavy on the archers. That's not what Imladris is about. If you want to play as Imladris, then you've got to be prepared to drop the archers and sort of be a man and get into melee a little bit more. Not that they didn't in this fight, of course, but you know, archers are not as necessary as Imladris. If you want to play an archer-heavy elven faction, Lothlorien or Mirkwood is the one for you. Not Imladris. Gwaith the Arthand defeat seems certain. There's a flood of orcs still over here, including some Melkor's Chosen, some elite infantry. Eldar Quinga are getting into melee. Whoever wins this fight over here is going to be very, very depleted when all is said and done. There's still elven knights and lancers running around, but you would question how useful they're going to be as the fight goes on. They did manage to skewer one of the Olag High there. There's still a lot of Minas Morgul Chosen down here as well. Meanwhile, over on the other side, here in this engagement, Lothlorien managing to kill off what's left of this Mirkwood force over here, and the Lothlorien cavalry, having been victorious against the odds against the Mirkwood cavalry, are now charging into the back lines of Mirkwood, trying to deal with the Thurny Tower. You can see also over here that Lothlorien are starting to close down the Cardland crossbows. They're going to try and shut them down. The problem is, though, Cardland do have several units of crossbows, so you can't stop all of them from firing all at once. They also have some Dunedain Rangers. Aradirith Amon Lank are still firing the Delupeng Yemenduia. The Cardland crossbows and the Mirkwood archers, I would imagine, have been pretty punishing on Lothlorien's lines, which is perhaps why they have ended up losing this engagement over here. And it is looking more and more like Mirkwood and Cardland are going to win this, but again, it is going to be a bloody fight. And who knows, I mean, Lothlorien Blades, it is going to come down to how well Cardland and Mirkwood can manage their skirmishes here, because Lothlorien are starting to pour forwards now that Mirkwood's flank collapsed, and they're going to shut down the skirmishes, and if it comes down to just a pure brawl in melee, Lothlorien could win this fight yet. You can see here the Sindar Blade Masters are coming forward. They have very limited armour values. So in melee, the Minas-Garithnan sharpshooters are not really going to be up to the task of facing them. However, the Manatar Romen Guardians are trying to shoot in support of them. You can see here a combination of the Rangers and the Minas-Garithnan archers are trying to face Lothlorien in melee, but that's going to go about as well as you would expect. The Lothlorien warriors are coming forward, the Aradirith and the Delupang are now being engaged. So yeah, actually Lothlorien have poured forwards and they've now managed to engage a lot of these skirmishes. It's still going to be very, very close, I think, on this flank. But all is not lost. Here comes more Lothlorien warriors. The AP is not going to be especially useful, but at this point just having more melee units than the enemy is going to be the thing to watch out for. The Aradirith are so strong in melee though, which is another problem. Like, that's the problem when dealing with elven skirmishes. It's not enough to just engage them with anything in melee. If you don't come forward with some quality, they're going to be able to beat you, especially with some of their more expensive units. Meanwhile over here, it does look as though Imladris is going to be victorious over here. Their cavalry in the end has managed to pull them out. They have managed to sort of gain an advantage here, which I think if the Orcs were playing, if the Orcs were a little bit more savvy in this fight, they should have gone for the High Elven cavalry more than the High Elven archers. There goes the Cardland general. Because if you notice, most of those Orc cavalry units tried to go for the Imladris archers. As I've said before, the Imladris archers, they're good, yes, but they're not amazing. Like, you don't need to be scared of them. The High Elven cavalry, on the other hand, you should be afraid. The Gwythi Rokdor and the Heru-Mairo are very, very powerful, and the Melkor's Chosen, the Wargs, the Trolls, the Witch Realm Inquisitors, the Orcs had all the tools they needed to deal with them, especially seeing as, honestly, the High Elven players played a very risky game in the initial engagements by charging forward their knights in such a gung-ho fashion. But in the end, the Orcs did not take advantage of that, and they're now being made to pay the price. Their broken advance also certainly didn't help matters, but Imladris are in a real state. Like, they are on their last legs. There is a case for saying they may yet lose this fight if those Witch Realm pikemen are able to kill off more of these knights, but is that a rout? It isn't a rout. They are shaken, however. Still some archers. There's some Heru-Mairo over there. Yeah, I mean, it's a real push and pull type affair over here, as well as over here. Both of the sort of 2v2s that have cropped up on either side have proven to be exceedingly bloody affairs, where it hasn't really been clear throughout the entire match who's going to win it. It hasn't been a runaway victory for anyone, which is good. These Lothlorien archers still having ammunition, however, is a good sign for them. They're able to shoot right into the flank of the Manatar Romen Guardians, which perhaps is a sign that Lothlorien are managing to regain the initiative here. Minas-Garithnan sharpshooters are trying to fire, but the Lothlorien archers are focusing them down. Warns of Tirn Gorthad, though, skewering one of the two Haldirs on display. The Aradirith Avon-Lank victory seems certain, but they have taken losses here. Elf versus Elf, so neither one really has a distinct advantage in melee in terms of quality, you would have to say. The Ethel Tirith still have ammunition as well, and they're going after the Warns of Tirn Gorthad, so that's a good choice. The Warns of Tirn Gorthad, actually, the Karas Galadhon's Guardians were surrounded for quite a long time in melee, which is why they lost. Normally they'd beat them, but they are enough to finish off the Karas Galadhon's Guardians, but they may also just end up being shot to death. The Galathram Nobles are fighting hard on the front line against the Palace Guard and the Manatar Romen Guardians. Overall, I would actually give this fight the advantage to Mirkwood and Cardlan. Galathram Nobles are good, but the Palace Guard are slightly better and they have slightly more in terms of backup. Lothlorien, however, do have that Overwatch fire from the Lothlorien archers coming into the flank, although I think now they've changed targets. Yeah, it's a real dicey affair, this. Guardians of Kharn fighting against the Noraturno warriors. What is actually left over here? Still some units of Orcs, and again, the fact that they have pikes left. Noraturno warriors are trying to focus them down. Really isn't much of them left. It's mostly Angmar. Mordor have 5 Temple Executioners remaining. There's a little mini fight going on over here. The fact that some of those Imladris archers do have some ammunition left is a sign really that the Orcs are living on borrowed time. There's also a few more units up here. The Minas Morgul Chosen break. The Heru-Makeel. There goes Thranduil. The other Haldir also just died in that very same shot. So pretty much every general's gone at this point, other than the Imladris generals, who are amazingly still alive in spite of the battered state of their knights. Eldar Quinga, Eldar Enwi Heru Makil. I mean, most of what Imladris have left at this point are their archers. Elven archers, of course, so they will still be pretty decent. They still have some ammunition, but they're probably going to expend it all on the orcs. So while I'm sure that Imladris now will be victorious in their struggle against the orcs, they're going to have to rely on Eldar Quinga in melee to be enough to defeat whatever is left over from these engagements over here. Maethil Asgallan from Lothlorien. Lothlorien's archers here, the last bastion really of what they hope to accomplish. Javelins and arrows being shot into this blob over here of Menethar Romen Guardians and the Palace Guard. That's a lot of damage being done to them as well. The Ethel Tirith are fighting, the Warns of Tirn Gorthad closing them down in melee. I don't know, I mean, the Warns of Tirn Gorthad would be enough to beat them normally, but their formation's not ideal and they could end up getting shot in the flank. Lothlorien warriors, yeah, I think Lothlorien are going to have enough here. I think Cardlan have just run out of men. The Galathram nobles, actually, who did retreat from that position, are now being engaged. Another volley of javelins there in the back, so I think Lothlorien are going to be victorious, and more than that, I think they're going to win the fight at this point, just because of these two units here. They're in good condition in comparison to most other units on the field, and Imladris' archers are the lower tier variants, so the Lothlorien archers should be able to beat them in melee, provided they don't take too much of a beating in what's left of this fight against Cardlan and Mirkwood. There's more warriors, more sword masses on the way over as well. Palace Guard is still fighting hard. Victory still seems certain for them. This Warden of Tirn Gorthad unit is now just being shot and killed, firing squad style. And I think that's just about it. I think the Angmar forces and the Mordor forces did indeed break. So Imladris are now going to start heading down, but it's mostly archers that are out of ammunition, very battered units of cavalry. It's possible that cycle charging in and out with those knights could yield results, but not if Lothlorien have any sort of ammunition left. I think they're dumping all of their ammo into finishing off Cardlan and Mirkwood though. But yeah, looking at the quality of what Lothlorien have left, I'd expect them to be the ones to go on to win this, to be frank. Maethil Asgallan are still alive as well, so they do still have some spears. The Palace Guard are still doing their best to fight. Is that Legolas? It might be. Only 3 of them left. Getting some kills. What happened to the Warns of Tirn Gorthad? They're still just getting shot. You can see that what's really saving them here is their armour. Nice thick plate. But no shields, and eventually this will yield the desired result. Some javelins are coming in, although to be frank I would save those javelins because they'll be very useful for dealing with the battered remnants of the Imladris cavalry. I guess they want to just make sure that Cardlan are gone. Meanwhile, the dual-ended glaives of the Palace Guard, they're still fighting hard here. There's simply too many Lothlorien archers. These guys still have ammunition? They still have their bows out, so perhaps they do. I think they have turned around as well, in anticipation of the Imladris forces that are heading towards them. If they have any ammunition left at all, that's going to force Imladris to move towards them. And the quality fight is just too in favour at this point of Lothlorien, I think. Norotino warriors and Eldar Quinga in melee are not going to be sufficient to defeat what Lothlorien have left. I think they still have Ethel Tirith that have ammo as well. A couple of Lothlorien warriors here and there. Maethil Asgallan. A very battered unit of Sindar Blade Masters. And there they go. They may still have a bit of ammunition as well, although they did waste a few shots there on a routing unit. So yeah, the fact that they still have ammunition and the fact that they still have the higher quality units remaining leads me to believe that Lothlorien should go on to win this fight without too much drama. But I've been wrong before. It all depends on how they deal with that High Elven cavalry and how well Imladris can use that cavalry. It's not impossible. If they engage all of the Lothlorien units from the front and then continuously cycle charge, who knows? But somehow I doubt it. I just don't think the High Elven cavalry has got the strength left at this point. as Lothlorien move forwards. We are in the final phases of this fight after all, so it is going to be a very quick engagement, whatever happens. Two very bloody side fights. Meanwhile, Lothlorien have left themselves open for a charge here as the Gwythi Rhokdor come forwards. The Maetha Ilas Galan are going to throw a volley, however, and they should be able to get one off. Indeed they do. Managing to kill off one of the unit models. They do charge into melee, but it wasn't the full charge, so now the spears should be able to do their thing in melee. And they do manage to escape, but they don't really have anything to show for their efforts, and every unit model in these cavalry units at this point counts. Yeah, and really everything comes down to the Imladris cavalry, and charging in from the front were some Imladris riders, but they were just immediately repelled by the Lothlorien archers, as you would expect. You don't really want to pin your hopes on a unit of very battered horse archers charging the enemy down. The Gwythi Rhokdor, perhaps, even depleted knights can be very, very powerful. If Imladris' infantry isn't moving, then they might admit defeat here. When all their cavalry is dead, they might just throw in the towel. They're coming forward again, but you can see again that their archer units still have ammunition. And again, it would be unlikely that they would win this battle regardless, but they needed to send forward their infantry as well. Like, there's nothing to distract these archers or these infantrymen from trying to zone these cavalry out. You know, this infantry is up here doing nothing at the moment, and if you let your cavalry die by just cycling in and out and just getting shot to pieces like they are now, you really have no chance at all. So I'm a little bit confused as to why the Imladris players are not moving in. Again, Imladris are not a conservative faction to play. You need to be proactive all the time and aggressive to get the most out of them, even in this situation, even when the quality is against them. Because to use their cavalry effectively, you need to try and distract these archers from doing their job. One player admitted defeat. Who was that? Must be one of the Orc players, I suppose. But yeah, that would be my criticism, essentially. If you want to play as a more defensive Elven faction, then all the other three would be a better fit. You know, Imladris are very popular, for good reason, because they're very strong, but you need to be aggressive with them to get the most out of them. It's a different kind of aggression to someone like Angmar, who comes forward with just numbers and brute force. There is more finesse about Imladris, but ultimately it's still the same sort of principle. You come forward, you engage as much as you can in melee, because in melee, you're the kings. You will be able to beat anything else in melee. As a general rule. They actually still do have some ammunition on these Eldar Quinga, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Like, Lothlorien are just going to come forward and engage them. The High Elven Cavalry is still buzzing around, but it's more of an annoyance than anything else. They have some Eldaranwe Heru Makil as well, but not in enough numbers, I don't think. Like, there's just too many Lothlorien archers, there's too much Ethel Tirith, the Maetha Ilas Galan are here. I don't really know why the Lothlorien army is retreating now. You need to get in there. Again, people need to understand that, like, when you've committed, there's no retreating. When you're that close to the enemy, if an ambush has happened, you've got to engage. If you turn your backs to them, you're only going to make the ambush more effective, and you have the advantage here still. The sight of a single unit of Eldar Quinga and extremely battered Heru Makil should not be enough to make you start thinking twice about your aggression. Although their really shoddy backline defence could end up costing them the whole battle here. The Heru Maira are killing them off. The Ethel Tirith are shaken. Yeah.
From such tidings does victory emerge.
Yeah, poor. Lothlorien had it, and they threw it away. I don't really feel as though I can say Imladris won this fight. Lothlorien lost it. That was incredibly poor of an advance from Lothlorien. I don't really... like... They knew the cavalry was there. Imladris didn't even really do that good a job in sort of concealing the fact that the cavalry was there and would sort of cycle charge in and out of the rear lines, and they still lost because of that. Not great at all. I feel as though I don't really know who I'd pick as an MVP in this fight, to be honest with you. I feel as though both of the 2v2 fights that happened were very good, lots of back and forth, very close, and then the fight between Imladris and Lothlorien at the end was a bit of a wet fart, to be honest with you. There was a lot of very questionable choices that were made. Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it's well played to Imladris ultimately, because they did end up winning in spite of the fact that I was poking holes in what they were doing. I would suggest that, again, you could argue that the Imladris archers were a big part of why they ended up pulling that fight out. But I would also suggest that they would have beaten the orcs in a much more convincing fashion if they had gone less archer heavy and gone for more infantry. Like, if I were Lord Finrod Felagund, if I was going for horse archers, I would have had no foot archers at all and just gone for more infantry. You know, even if it's just Eldar Makar that have the armour upgrade, that's still a substantial amount of power you've got in infantry, especially against lower tier orcs, which, you know, there were a lot of them they were facing. They would have been able to press home more of an advantage in melee there. And if I was Arsal, maybe I would have traded in my archers for just having some Imladris Guardians or something, because that would have really thrown Mordor's infantry back. You know, the only thing that would have been able to withstand that would have been the really elite stuff like the Melkor's, well, not Melkor's Chosen, they're not an infantry unit, but the Temple Executioners, the Temple Guard, stuff like that. As for the other fight, I think that Cardland and Mirkwood, it looked like things were going okay for them, but then Lothlorien ironically managed to break out and engaged all of their skirmishers in melee, which was where the main problem for them lay. Also, Mirkwood blobbed up a little bit and allowed Lothlorien to surround them and kill them off more efficiently than they perhaps would have liked. But even so, good fight all around, very, very close, and ultimately it came down to the elves breaking, of all things. It was the cavalry that ultimately did Lothlorien in, even if that was down more to player error than actually the composition of the faction that made the Ilaz Gelen with some javelins left alive should have been enough to, you know, finish off very depleted units of cavalry like that. But still, big thank you to Arsal Ali for sending this one in. It was a very good free-for-all, one of the better free-for-alls I've done, actually. Very, very close indeed. And yeah, I don't know what's going to be coming up next, to be honest. I've still got a few things on the backlog that I want to do. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.